Question 1. Performance analysis shows that an automated script responsible for deploying virtual machines in the Cisco Enterprise Cloud environment contains a subtle but exploitable security misconfiguration. The network engineer who discovered this has the technical expertise to correct it immediately. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Report the security misconfiguration through the designated incident response and security channels for assessment and remediation. Option B. Wait for the next scheduled maintenance window to address the misconfiguration. Option C. Document the misconfiguration and plan to fix it during the next major code refactoring cycle. Option D. Immediately modify the script to correct the misconfiguration and then report the change. Correct answer is D. Immediately modify the script to correct the misconfiguration and then report the change. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a network engineer discovers a potential security vulnerability in an automated cloud deployment script. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of addressing the vulnerability with the established change management processes and the potential impact of an unauthorized fix. The engineer must exercise careful judgment to ensure security is maintained without causing operational disruption or violating organizational policies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves reporting the vulnerability through the established incident response and security channel. This aligns with best professional practice and regulatory compliance by ensuring that security issues are handled in a controlled, documented, and authorized manner. This process allows for proper risk assessment, impact analysis, and coordinated remediation, preventing unintended consequences and maintaining audit trails. In the context of cloud automation, adherence to security best practices and organizational policies is paramount to prevent breaches and ensure compliance with data protection regulations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a fix without authorization bypasses critical security and change management protocols. This action, while well-intentioned, constitutes a significant ethical and regulatory failure. It undermines the integrity of the change management process, which is often mandated by regulatory frameworks to ensure system stability and security. Such unauthorized changes can lead to unforeseen operational issues, security gaps, and a lack of accountability, potentially violating compliance requirements related to system integrity and security incident management. Delaying reporting the vulnerability, even if a fix is planned, is also professionally unacceptable. This inaction creates a window of opportunity for exploitation, directly contravening the ethical obligation to protect organizational assets and data. Regulatory frameworks often mandate timely reporting and remediation of security vulnerabilities to prevent data breaches and maintain service availability. Failing to document the discovery and the proposed fix, even if reporting through proper channels, hinders transparency and accountability. Proper documentation is a cornerstone of regulatory compliance and professional practice, providing an audit trail and facilitating future analysis and improvement. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process when encountering security vulnerabilities in automated systems. This process typically involves 1. Immediate identification and assessment of the vulnerability. 2. Reporting the vulnerability through established channels, e.g., Security Operations Center, Incident Response Team. 3. Following organizational policies for change management and incident response. 4. Collaborating with relevant teams, security, operations, development, for coordinated remediation. 5. Thorough documentation of all actions taken. This systematic approach ensures that security risks are managed effectively, compliance is maintained, and operational stability is preserved. Question 2. The control framework reveals a critical need to ensure that automated deployments within the Cisco Enterprise Cloud environment consistently adhere to established security policies and regulatory mandates. Given the rapid pace of cloud automation, which of the following strategies best embeds continuous compliance monitoring into the CI/CD pipeline? Option A. Assign the sole responsibility for ensuring compliance to the operations team, who will perform manual checks and remediation after the automated deployment is live. Option B. Implement automated security scanning and compliance validation as mandatory gates within the CI/CD pipeline, halting deployments if any policy violations or compliance deviations are detected. Option C. Prioritize deployment speed by bypassing automated security checks and compliance validations during the CI/CD process, relying on ad hoc manual checks later. Option D. Conduct comprehensive manual security audits and compliance reviews only after the automated deployment to production has been successfully completed. The correct answer is B. Implement automated security scanning and compliance validation as mandatory gates within the CI/CD pipeline, halting deployments if any policy violations or compliance deviations are detected. Explanation: the control framework reveals a common challenge in cloud automation, balancing the speed of deployment with robust security and compliance. The scenario requires a deep understanding of how to integrate security best practices into an automated CI/CD pipeline for a Cisco enterprise cloud environment, specifically addressing the need for continuous compliance monitoring. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that automation, while efficient, does not inadvertently create security vulnerabilities or compliance gaps. This requires a proactive approach to security and compliance embedded within the automation workflow, rather than as an afterthought. Correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the requirement for continuous compliance monitoring within the automated deployment lifecycle. By integrating security scanning tools and compliance checks as mandatory stages within the CI/CD pipeline, the organization ensures that any deviations from established security policies or regulatory requirements are identified and remediated before deployment. This proactive stance aligns with the principle of security by design and compliance by design, which are critical in regulated industries and for maintaining the integrity of enterprise cloud environments. This approach minimizes risk, reduces the cost of remediation, and ensures adherence to the specified regulatory framework for the Cisco Enterprise Cloud. An incorrect approach that relies solely on post-deployment audits fails to meet the continuous compliance requirement. Regulatory frameworks often mandate proactive risk management and immediate detection of noncompliance. Waiting for a periodic audit means that vulnerabilities or compliance breaches could exist in the production environment for an extended period, exposing the organization to significant risks and potential penalties. Another incorrect approach that bypasses automated security checks for faster deployments is a direct violation of security best practices and likely regulatory mandates for secure cloud operations. Automation should enhance, not compromise, security. Expediting deployments at the expense of security reviews creates a high-risk environment and demonstrates a disregard for established control frameworks. A third incorrect approach that delegates compliance responsibility solely to the operations team after deployment overlooks the inherent security responsibilities of the development and deployment processes. Compliance and security are shared responsibilities throughout the lifecycle. Shifting this burden post-deployment is inefficient and increases the likelihood of undetected issues. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, the organization's risk appetite, and the capabilities of automation tools. Professionals should prioritize integrating security and compliance checks at every stage of the automation pipeline, from code commit to deployment and ongoing operations. This involves selecting appropriate tools, defining clear policies, and establishing automated enforcement mechanisms. Regular review and adaptation of these processes based on evolving threats and regulatory changes are also crucial. Question 3. Analysis of the most effective approach for implementing automated security policy enforcement within a Cisco Enterprise Cloud environment, considering U.S. federal regulatory compliance and best practices for DevSecOps. Option A. Rely primarily on manual security audits conducted after deployment to identify and address policy violations. Option B. Integrate security policy checks and automated remediation directly into the CI/CD pipeline, using infrastructure as code and security scanning tools. Option C. Implement security policies solely at the network perimeter, assuming internal systems are inherently secure. Option D. Prioritize rapid deployment of cloud services with a plan to address security and compliance in a subsequent phase. The correct answer is B. Integrate security policy checks and automated remediation directly into the CI/CD pipeline using infrastructure as code and security scanning tools. Explanation: scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise cloud automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and agility with robust security and compliance requirements. The professional is tasked with evaluating different approaches to implementing automated security policy enforcement within a cloud environment. The challenge lies in selecting an approach that not only meets technical objectives, but also adheres to the specific regulatory framework governing the organization's operations, which in this context is assumed to be U.S. federal regulations pertaining to cloud security and data protection, such as NIST guidelines and potentially specific agency mandates if applicable. Failure to align with these regulations can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and data breaches. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves integrating security policy enforcement directly into the CI/CD pipeline using infrastructure as code, ISC tools, and automated security scanning. This aligns with best practices for DevSecOps and is strongly supported by U.S. regulatory frameworks like NIST SB 800-53, which emphasizes continuous monitoring and automated controls for security. By embedding security checks and policy enforcement at the earliest stages of development and deployment, organizations can proactively identify and remediate vulnerabilities before they reach production. This approach ensures that security is not an afterthought but a fundamental component of the automation strategy, directly contributing to compliance with data protection and privacy mandates. It fosters a culture of security ownership and reduces the risk of human error in manual security reviews. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that relies solely on post-deployment manual security audits, while a necessary component of a comprehensive security program, is insufficient as the primary method of automated policy enforcement. This fails to meet the proactive and continuous nature of security expected by U.S. regulations. It introduces significant delays in identifying and remediating issues, increasing the attack surface and the likelihood of compliance violations. Another incorrect approach would be to implement security policies only at the network perimeter without considering application-level security or data-level controls. This is a fragmented security strategy that is not aligned with modern cloud security principles or regulatory expectations, which often require defense-in-depth and granular access controls. Such an approach leaves critical vulnerabilities unaddressed within the application and data layers. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over any form of automated security validation, even if it promises to catch up later, is a direct contravention of regulatory requirements for secure system development and operation. This creates an unacceptable level of risk and is highly likely to result in non-compliance with data protection laws and security standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves understanding the organization's threat landscape, the sensitivity of the data being processed, and the specific regulatory obligations. When evaluating automation strategies, the primary consideration should be how effectively the approach embeds security and compliance controls throughout the entire lifecycle. This means prioritizing solutions that offer continuous monitoring, automated policy enforcement, and integration with development workflows. Regular review of security controls against evolving regulatory requirements and threat intelligence is also crucial. Question 4. Benchmark analysis indicates that a new cloud automation initiative aims to significantly accelerate the deployment of network services within the enterprise cloud. The primary goal is to reduce time to market for new features. However, the organization operates under strict data privacy regulations that mandate specific security controls and audit trails for all data processing activities. Which approach to impact assessment best aligns with both the automation goals and regulatory requirements? Option A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that integrates security and compliance requirements into the design and testing phases of the automation workflow, including automated validation of security controls and audit logging mechanisms before production deployment. Option B. Implement the automation as quickly as possible and then initiate a separate post-deployment impact assessment to identify and address any security or compliance gaps that may have arisen. Option C. Rely on manual security reviews conducted by a separate team after the automation has been deployed to identify potential compliance issues, assuming the automation itself will not introduce new risks. Option D. Prioritize the speed of deployment by focusing the impact assessment solely on the functional requirements of the automation deferring security and compliance reviews to a later stage once the services are operational. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that integrates security and compliance requirements into the design and testing phases of the automation workflow, including automated validation of security controls and audit logging mechanisms before production deployment. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, balancing the drive for rapid deployment with the imperative of robust security and compliance. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that automated processes, while efficient, do not inadvertently create vulnerabilities or violate regulatory mandates. This requires a proactive and integrated approach to impact assessment, rather than a reactive one. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive, pre-deployment impact assessment that considers security, compliance, and operational risks. This aligns with the principles of security by design and compliance by design, which are fundamental to responsible cloud automation. By embedding these considerations into the automation lifecycle from the outset, organizations can mitigate risks before they manifest, ensuring adherence to relevant regulations and maintaining a strong security posture. This proactive stance is not just best practice. It is often a regulatory requirement to demonstrate due diligence in protecting sensitive data and systems. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on functional requirements without considering security implications fails to meet regulatory obligations for data protection and system integrity. This could lead to breaches, non-compliance penalties, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that delays compliance checks until after deployment introduces significant risk. Regulations typically require compliance to be demonstrable throughout the operational lifecycle, not as an afterthought. This reactive posture makes remediation costly and complex, and it may not satisfy audit requirements. Finally, an approach that relies on manual, ad hoc security reviews for automated deployments is inefficient and prone to human error, increasing the likelihood of overlooking critical vulnerabilities and failing to meet the continuous compliance demands of automated environments. Professional decision-making in this context should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should identify potential impacts of automation on security, compliance, and operations, evaluate the likelihood and severity of these impacts, and define mitigation strategies. Automation engineers and security professionals must collaborate closely, ensuring that impact assessments are integrated into the CI/CD pipeline, and that automated checks and balances are in place to enforce compliance and security policies. Question 5. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of unauthorized access attempts to sensitive customer data repositories within the automated cloud environment. These attempts are being blocked by security controls, but the frequency is increasing, suggesting a sophisticated and persistent threat actor. The organization is subject to U.S. federal regulations governing data protection and privacy. Which of the following automated response strategies is the most compliant and professionally sound approach to address this escalating security threat? Option A. Automatically trigger a comprehensive security audit of the affected systems and initiate a rollback of the most recent code deployments that coincide with the increase in attempts, while simultaneously alerting the Security Operations Center for manual investigation and remediation. Option B. Temporarily disable all automated scaling features for the affected services to reduce the attack surface, and instruct the operations team to manually review all access logs for the past 72 hours. Option C. Increase the logging verbosity for all network traffic and user activity, and rely on the existing security controls to continue blocking the unauthorized access attempts without further automated intervention. Option D. Immediately isolate the affected cloud infrastructure segments from the rest of the network and initiate a full system reprovisioning from a known good baseline, while also generating an incident report for regulatory compliance. Correct answer is A. Automatically trigger a comprehensive security audit of the affected systems and initiate a rollback of the most recent code deployments that coincide with the increase in attempts, while simultaneously alerting the Security Operations Center for manual investigation and remediation. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, ensuring compliance and security while maintaining operational efficiency. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for rapid deployment and scaling with the imperative to adhere to strict data privacy regulations. Professionals must navigate the complexities of automated workflows, which can inadvertently introduce vulnerabilities or misconfigurations if not meticulously designed and validated against regulatory mandates. The pressure to deliver services quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise security and compliance, making careful judgment and a robust governance framework essential. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive, integrated security and compliance posture. By embedding automated compliance checks and security validations directly into the CI/CD pipeline, organizations can identify and remediate potential issues before they impact production environments. This aligns with the principles of security by design and compliance by design, which are increasingly mandated by regulatory bodies. Specifically, in the context of U.S. regulations like those enforced by NIST and potentially HIPAA or PCI DSS, depending on the data handled, this approach ensures that automated processes are continuously audited and aligned with established security baselines and data handling requirements. It fosters a culture of accountability and reduces the risk of human error in complex automated deployments. An incorrect approach that relies solely on post-deployment audits fails to meet regulatory expectations for continuous monitoring and proactive risk management. Regulations often require evidence of ongoing compliance, not just a snapshot in time. This reactive stance increases the likelihood of breaches or non-compliance incidents going undetected for extended periods, leading to significant penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that bypasses automated security checks for speed directly violates the principle of least privilege and robust access controls, which are fundamental to data protection laws. This creates an unacceptable attack surface and demonstrates a disregard for established security best practices and regulatory requirements for safeguarding sensitive information. A third incorrect approach that involves manual intervention for every compliance check, while seemingly safer, is inefficient and prone to human error in a dynamic cloud environment. It undermines the very purpose of automation and can lead to delays that are themselves a form of operational failure, potentially impacting service-level agreements and business continuity, which can have regulatory implications. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, e.g., U.S. federal and state laws concerning data privacy and cloud security. This includes identifying specific controls and requirements relevant to the automated cloud environment. Professionals should then map these requirements to the automation lifecycle, from infrastructure provisioning to application deployment and ongoing operations. Implementing automated policy enforcement, continuous compliance monitoring, and robust logging and auditing mechanisms are critical steps. Furthermore, fostering collaboration between development, operations, and security teams, DevSecOps, ensures that compliance and security are considered at every stage of the automation process. Regular training on regulatory updates and best practices is also vital. Question 6. Research into automating the deployment of a new microservices-based application within a Cisco enterprise cloud environment reveals a critical need to ensure compliance with U.S. federal data protection regulations. Which of the following approaches best integrates risk assessment into the automation lifecycle to meet these regulatory demands? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of the proposed automation workflows and infrastructure configurations before initiating any automated deployments, and integrate identified mitigation strategies directly into the automation scripts and deployment pipelines. Option B. Rely exclusively on the security features and default configurations provided by the cloud platform vendor and the automation tools, assuming they meet all relevant U.S. federal data protection regulations. Option C. Prioritize the rapid deployment of the microservices application using automation to gain a competitive advantage, and plan to conduct a risk assessment and implement security patches only after the application is live in production. Option D. Perform a risk assessment only after the application has been fully deployed and is operational, focusing on identifying any immediate security vulnerabilities that may have arisen during the automation process. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of the proposed automation workflows and infrastructure configurations before initiating any automated deployments, and integrate identified mitigation strategies directly into the automation scripts and deployment pipelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and innovation with robust security and compliance requirements. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that automated processes, while efficient, do not inadvertently create vulnerabilities or violate regulatory mandates. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that integrates risk assessment seamlessly into the automation lifecycle, rather than treating it as an afterthought. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it embeds risk assessment as a continuous and integral part of the automation pipeline. This aligns with the principles of security by design and compliance by design, which are increasingly mandated by regulatory frameworks. By proactively identifying and mitigating risks during the design and implementation phases of automation, organizations can prevent costly breaches, fines, and reputational damage. This approach fosters a culture of security and compliance, ensuring that automation efforts contribute to, rather than detract from, the organization's overall risk posture. An incorrect approach that treats risk assessment as a post-deployment activity is professionally unacceptable. This failure represents a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. It violates the spirit, and often the letter, of regulations that require proactive risk management and due diligence. For instance, in the U.S., frameworks like NIST Cybersecurity Framework and specific industry regulations, e.g., HIPAA for healthcare, PCI DSS for payment card data, emphasize continuous monitoring and proactive risk identification. Failing to integrate risk assessment early means that vulnerabilities could be exploited before they are even identified, leading to potential data breaches and noncompliance. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of responsibility towards protecting sensitive data and maintaining system integrity. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on vendor-provided security features without independent validation is also professionally unsound. While vendors invest heavily in security, their solutions are not infallible, and their security configurations may not align with an organization's specific risk appetite or regulatory obligations. This approach can lead to regulatory failures if the vendor's default settings do not meet specific compliance standards, e.g., data residency requirements under GDPR, if applicable, or specific access control mandates under SOX. It also represents an ethical failure by abdicating responsibility for due diligence and potentially exposing the organization to risks that could have been identified through independent assessment. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over thorough risk assessment is a direct contravention of risk management principles. This often leads to the introduction of insecure configurations or unpatched vulnerabilities into the production environment. Professionally, this is a critical failure that can result in severe consequences, including significant financial penalties for noncompliance with data protection laws and industry standards. It also erodes trust with customers and stakeholders, representing an ethical breach of the duty of care to protect assets and information. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a phased approach to automation risk assessment. This begins with understanding the regulatory landscape relevant to the organization's operations and data. Next, it requires defining clear risk tolerance levels and security baselines for automated cloud environments. During the design phase of automation, potential risks associated with each component and workflow should be identified and documented. Mitigation strategies should be developed and integrated into the automation code or deployment processes. Finally, continuous monitoring and periodic reassessment of risks are crucial to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory changes. This iterative process ensures that automation remains a tool for efficiency without compromising security and compliance. Question 7. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to integrating risk assessment into the automation of Cisco enterprise cloud solutions. Which of the following strategies best aligns with regulatory expectations for proactive risk management in automated cloud environments? Option A. Prioritizing the speed and efficiency of automated cloud deployments, with risk assessments conducted only after the automation has been fully deployed and is operational. Option B. Delegating all risk assessment responsibilities to the cloud automation tools, assuming their algorithms are sufficient to identify and mitigate all potential threats and compliance gaps. Option C. Relying solely on the built-in risk assessment capabilities of cloud automation platforms without any independent human validation or contextual analysis. Option D. Implementing automated security scans and compliance checks as a mandatory, integrated step within the CI/CD pipeline for all cloud automation deployments, with human review of critical findings before production rollout. The correct answer is D. Implementing automated security scans and compliance checks as a mandatory, integrated step within the CI/CD pipeline for all cloud automation deployments, with human review of critical findings before production rollout. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, balancing the rapid deployment capabilities of automated solutions with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that automation, while increasing efficiency, does not inadvertently create new vulnerabilities or bypass established risk management processes. Careful judgment is required to integrate risk assessment seamlessly into the automation lifecycle. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it embeds risk assessment as a continuous, integral part of the automation strategy. By proactively identifying and mitigating risks before and during the implementation of automated cloud solutions, organizations adhere to the principles of secure by design and compliance by design. This aligns with regulatory expectations that demand a proactive and ongoing approach to risk management, ensuring that automated processes are not only efficient, but also secure and compliant with relevant frameworks. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the speed of deployment without adequate risk consideration fails to meet regulatory obligations. Such an approach could lead to the introduction of unassessed vulnerabilities, potentially violating data protection laws or industry-specific compliance standards. For instance, neglecting to assess the security implications of automated infrastructure provisioning could expose sensitive data to unauthorized access, a direct contravention of data privacy regulations. Another incorrect approach that relies on post-deployment risk assessment is also professionally unacceptable. While post-deployment reviews are valuable, they are reactive. In the context of cloud automation, where changes can propagate rapidly, a reactive stance is insufficient. It allows risks to materialize before they are addressed, increasing the likelihood of breaches or compliance failures. This delays remediation and can result in significant financial and reputational damage, failing to meet the due diligence expected by regulatory bodies. Finally, an approach that delegates risk assessment entirely to the automation tools themselves, without human oversight and expert judgment, is flawed. Automation tools are powerful but lack the nuanced understanding of business context and evolving threat landscapes that human risk assessors possess. Over-reliance on automated risk assessment without human validation can lead to missed critical risks or misinterpretation of findings, undermining the effectiveness of the entire risk management program and potentially leading to non-compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework that is integrated into the cloud automation lifecycle. This includes defining clear roles and responsibilities for risk assessment, establishing criteria for risk identification and evaluation, and implementing mechanisms for ongoing monitoring and review. Professionals should prioritize a proactive, continuous, and human-validated approach to risk assessment, ensuring that automation serves to enhance, not compromise, the organization's security and compliance posture. Question 8. The evaluation methodology shows that a proposed cloud automation initiative for network provisioning has undergone an initial impact assessment. The assessment primarily focused on the reduction of manual configuration time and the potential for faster service deployment. However, it did not extensively detail the potential effects on existing security policies, data residency requirements, or the operational procedures for incident response in the automated environment. Which of the following approaches to refining this impact assessment best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for enterprise cloud automation? Option A. Conduct a limited review focusing only on the potential for increased system performance and reduced latency, as these are the primary technical benefits. Option B. Rely on vendor-provided documentation for the automation tool to validate its security and compliance features, assuming it meets industry standards. Option C. Prioritize the automation's ability to integrate with existing IT service management tools, as this is the most significant factor for operational efficiency. Option D. Expand the assessment to include a detailed analysis of how the automation might affect data integrity, access controls, compliance with data residency laws, and the procedures for handling security incidents and operational disruptions. The correct answer is D. Expand the assessment to include a detailed analysis of how the automation might affect data integrity, access controls, compliance with data residency laws, and the procedures for handling security incidents and operational disruptions. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows the critical need for a thorough impact assessment when automating enterprise cloud solutions. This scenario is professionally challenging because the rapid pace of technological change and the inherent complexity of cloud environments can lead to unforeseen consequences if not meticulously analyzed. A robust impact assessment is not merely a technical exercise. It is a fundamental requirement for ensuring compliance, security, and operational stability. The correct approach, which involves a comprehensive analysis of potential impacts across technical, operational, security, and business domains, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of responsible automation and risk management, often mandated by regulatory frameworks that emphasize due diligence and proactive identification of potential harms. By systematically evaluating how automation affects existing infrastructure, data integrity, user access, and business processes, organizations can mitigate risks and ensure that the automation aligns with strategic objectives and regulatory obligations. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining trust and demonstrating accountability. Incorrect approaches fail to meet these professional and regulatory standards. One incorrect approach might focus solely on the technical efficiency gains of automation, neglecting the broader implications. This failure to consider operational disruption, such as unintended downtime or data corruption, constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical lapse, as it can lead to service unavailability and potential data breaches, violating data protection regulations. Another incorrect approach might prioritize speed of deployment over thorough testing and validation. This haste can result in security vulnerabilities being overlooked, exposing sensitive data and systems to unauthorized access, which is a direct contravention of cybersecurity mandates and data privacy laws. A third incorrect approach could involve a superficial assessment that relies on assumptions rather than concrete evidence. This lack of rigor can lead to the automation being deployed in a manner that is incompatible with existing security policies or compliance requirements, creating a compliance gap and increasing the organization's risk profile. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured, multidisciplinary approach. This includes clearly defining the scope of the automation, identifying all relevant stakeholders, and systematically assessing potential impacts using a predefined framework. Professionals should prioritize evidence-based analysis over assumptions and ensure that the assessment covers technical, operational, security, and business aspects. Regular review and validation throughout the automation lifecycle are also essential to adapt to evolving risks and requirements. Question 9. Which approach would be most effective for ensuring that automated cloud deployments adhere to all relevant regulatory frameworks and internal security policies from the initial design phase through to ongoing operations, from a stakeholder perspective? Option A. Deploy automation solutions rapidly to meet business demands, and then schedule separate, post-deployment audits to identify and address any security or compliance gaps. Option B. Implement security and compliance controls manually after the automated cloud environment has been established and is operational. Option C. Prioritize business unit requests for speed and flexibility in automation, with the understanding that security and compliance requirements can be retrofitted as needed. Option D. Integrate automated security and compliance checks directly into the CI/CD pipelines and infrastructure as code templates, with mandatory sign-offs from security and compliance teams before deployment. The correct answer is D. Integrate automated security and compliance checks directly into the CI/CD pipelines and infrastructure as code templates, with mandatory sign-offs from security and compliance teams before deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise cloud automation projects, balancing the immediate need for rapid deployment and feature delivery with the long-term imperative of robust security and compliance. Stakeholders, particularly business units, often prioritize speed to market, while security and compliance teams focus on risk mitigation and adherence to regulatory standards. The professional challenge lies in navigating these competing priorities to achieve a solution that is both innovative and secure, without compromising the organization's legal standing or reputation. The pressure to deliver quickly can lead to shortcuts that, while seemingly efficient in the short term, create significant long-term liabilities. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively integrating security and compliance requirements into the automation design and development lifecycle from the outset. This means engaging security and compliance teams early, understanding their mandates, and embedding automated checks, policy enforcement, and audit trails directly into the cloud automation workflows. This aligns with the principles of security by design and compliance by design, which are fundamental to responsible cloud adoption and automation. By automating compliance checks and security validations, the organization ensures that deployments are not only fast but also consistently adhere to established standards, thereby minimizing the risk of regulatory violations and security breaches. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining trust with stakeholders and avoiding costly remediation efforts later. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to defer security and compliance reviews until after the automation has been deployed and is in production. This is a reactive strategy that significantly increases the risk of discovering non-compliance or security vulnerabilities late in the process, leading to costly and time-consuming remediation, potential service disruptions, and regulatory penalties. It demonstrates a failure to prioritize risk management and a disregard for established governance frameworks. Another incorrect approach is to implement security and compliance measures as manual, out-of-band processes that are separate from the automation workflows. This creates a disconnect between the automated deployment and the necessary governance, making it difficult to ensure consistent application of controls and increasing the likelihood of human error. It also negates the benefits of automation by introducing manual bottlenecks and reducing the overall efficiency and reliability of the system. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize business unit demands for speed over established security and compliance policies, assuming that these can be addressed later. This approach fundamentally misunderstands the role of security and compliance as enablers of sustainable business operations, not impediments. It exposes the organization to significant legal, financial, and reputational risks, and can lead to a breakdown of trust between different departments. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, proactive approach to cloud automation. This involves establishing clear communication channels with all relevant stakeholders, including business units, security, compliance, and legal teams, from the project's inception. The decision-making process should prioritize understanding and integrating regulatory requirements and security best practices into the automation design. This includes leveraging automation tools to enforce policies, conduct continuous monitoring, and generate audit trails. When faced with competing demands, professionals must advocate for solutions that uphold compliance and security standards, explaining the long-term risks and costs associated with shortcuts. The goal is to build automated systems that are inherently secure and compliant, rather than attempting to bolt on these crucial elements after the fact. Question 10. The review process indicates a need to enhance the agility and efficiency of network provisioning within the Cisco Enterprise Cloud. Considering the importance of maintaining operational integrity and adhering to best practices for automation, which of the following strategies best aligns with a professional and compliant approach to introducing new automation capabilities? Option A. Develop and deploy automation scripts and workflows in a phased manner, starting with non-critical services, and incorporate rigorous testing, validation, and comprehensive logging for all changes. Option B. Prioritize the automation of the most complex and mission-critical network functions first to demonstrate immediate impact, and defer detailed logging and auditing until after initial deployment. Option C. Rely exclusively on third-party managed services for all network automation, without internal validation or understanding of the underlying automation logic, to minimize internal resource strain. Option D. Implement a comprehensive end-to-end automation solution across all network services simultaneously, leveraging publicly available scripts and templates to accelerate deployment. The correct answer is D. Implement a comprehensive end-to-end automation solution across all network services simultaneously, leveraging publicly available scripts and templates to accelerate deployment. Explanation. The review process indicates a need to automate network provisioning in a Cisco enterprise cloud environment. This scenario is professionally challenging because the rapid pace of cloud adoption and the complexity of modern network infrastructure demand efficient and reliable automation solutions. Missteps in automation can lead to significant downtime, security vulnerabilities, and compliance issues. Careful judgment is required to select an automation strategy that aligns with both technical requirements and regulatory adherence. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased, iterative implementation of automation, starting with well-defined, low-risk use cases. This allows for thorough testing, validation, and refinement of automation scripts and workflows before broader deployment. It also emphasizes robust monitoring and logging, which are critical for troubleshooting, auditing, and demonstrating compliance with any relevant regulatory frameworks governing data handling and infrastructure operations. This methodology minimizes the blast radius of potential errors and builds confidence in the automation solution. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on a big bang deployment of a comprehensive automation suite without adequate testing or phased rollout is professionally unacceptable. This is because it significantly increases the risk of widespread service disruption and introduces numerous potential failure points that are difficult to isolate and resolve under pressure. Such an approach could lead to regulatory noncompliance if it results in unauthorized access, data breaches, or a failure to meet service-level agreements mandated by industry regulations. Another incorrect approach that neglects robust logging and auditing mechanisms is also professionally unacceptable. In regulated environments, the ability to trace changes, identify the source of issues, and demonstrate adherence to security policies is paramount. A lack of proper logging hinders incident response, makes compliance audits extremely difficult, and can be interpreted as a failure to maintain adequate control over the IT environment, potentially leading to penalties. A third incorrect approach that involves using unverified or community-sourced automation scripts without rigorous internal validation and security review is professionally unacceptable. This introduces significant security risks, as these scripts may contain vulnerabilities or unintended consequences that could compromise the network or sensitive data. This directly violates the principle of due diligence and could lead to severe regulatory breaches related to data security and integrity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough assessment of the current environment, clear definition of automation goals, and a risk-based approach to implementation. This includes identifying critical infrastructure components, understanding data sensitivity, and mapping automation efforts to business objectives. Prioritizing security, compliance, and operational stability throughout the automation lifecycle is essential. Professionals should always advocate for a phased rollout, comprehensive testing, continuous monitoring, and robust documentation to ensure successful and compliant automation. Question 11. The analysis reveals that a financial services organization is seeking to automate its cloud infrastructure, provisioning to accelerate deployment cycles. However, the organization operates under strict financial regulations that mandate data integrity, auditability, and robust access controls for all financial data. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework for automating Cisco enterprise cloud deployments in this context? Option A. Deploying automation scripts that grant broad administrative privileges to the automation service account to simplify access management and reduce operational overhead. Option B. Prioritizing the use of open-source automation tools with minimal configuration to reduce initial setup time, deferring security and compliance checks to a later phase. Option C. Implementing a fully automated, self-service provisioning portal that bypasses manual approval steps for all resource requests to maximize speed. Option D. Developing automated workflows that integrate with existing security and compliance monitoring tools, ensuring all provisioned resources adhere to predefined security baselines and generate comprehensive audit logs. Correct answer is C. Implementing a fully automated, self-service provisioning portal that bypasses manual approval steps for all resource requests to maximize speed. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation. balancing the drive for efficiency with the need for robust security and compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying and implementing process optimizations that not only improve speed and reduce manual effort, but also adhere strictly to the regulatory framework governing cloud deployments. This requires a deep understanding of both automation technologies and the specific compliance mandates. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive, risk-based assessment before implementing changes. By involving security and compliance teams early, it ensures that any automation strategy is designed with regulatory requirements in mind from the outset. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of introducing vulnerabilities or non-compliance issues, which could lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. Adhering to the principle of security by design and compliance by design is paramount in regulated environments. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed and cost reduction without considering security implications would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. For instance, bypassing established change control processes or neglecting to validate security configurations within automated workflows could lead to unauthorized access, data breaches, or system misconfigurations that violate data protection laws and industry-specific regulations. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing automation without proper documentation or audit trails, would hinder compliance audits and make it impossible to demonstrate adherence to regulatory standards, constituting a failure in accountability and transparency. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape. This involves identifying all applicable laws, industry standards, and internal policies. Next, a risk assessment should be conducted to understand the potential impact of any proposed automation on security and compliance. Solutions should then be evaluated based on their ability to meet both efficiency goals and regulatory mandates. Collaboration with security, compliance, and legal teams is essential throughout the process. Finally, continuous monitoring and auditing of automated processes are necessary to ensure ongoing compliance and identify any deviations or emerging risks. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates that automated cloud infrastructure deployments are not consistently adhering to established security baselines and regulatory compliance mandates. Which of the following actions is the most effective and professionally responsible approach to address this critical finding? Option A. Temporarily suspend all cloud automation initiatives until a complete redesign of the organizational governance framework is finalized. Option B. Implement automated security and compliance checks directly within the CI/CD pipelines for cloud infrastructure provisioning. Option C. Increase the frequency of manual security audits for all automated cloud deployments. Option D. Focus on remediating individual security vulnerabilities identified in deployed cloud resources without altering the automation processes. The correct answer is B. Implement automated security and compliance checks directly within the CI/CD pipelines for cloud infrastructure provisioning. Explanation: Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and agility with robust security and compliance requirements. The governance review highlights a potential gap where automated processes might inadvertently bypass established security controls or fail to meet regulatory mandates. The professional challenge lies in identifying the root cause of this discrepancy and implementing a solution that upholds both operational efficiency and compliance without introducing new vulnerabilities or hindering innovation. The pressure to deliver automated solutions quickly can sometimes lead to overlooking critical security and governance aspects, making a thorough, risk-based approach essential. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the automation workflows, specifically focusing on how security and compliance checks are integrated. This includes verifying that the automation scripts and tools are configured to adhere to the organization's defined security policies, industry best practices, and relevant regulatory frameworks. Requires a deep understanding of the specific cloud services being automated and their security configurations. By ensuring that security and compliance are baked into the automation pipeline from the outset, the organization can achieve its automation goals while maintaining a strong security posture and meeting its legal and ethical obligations. This proactive integration is a cornerstone of secure cloud adoption and aligns with principles of DevSecOps, where security is a shared responsibility throughout the development and operational lifecycle. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to simply increase manual oversight of automated deployments. This negates the purpose of automation, introduces human error, and creates a bottleneck. Failing to address the underlying issue of insecure automation represents a failure to leverage technology effectively, and a disregard for the efficiency gains automation is intended to provide. Another incorrect approach is to halt all automation efforts until a complete overhaul of the governance framework is achieved. While thoroughness is important, this extreme measure can stifle innovation and competitive advantage. It fails to acknowledge that governance and automation can evolve in parallel, and that incremental improvements are often more practical and effective. This approach demonstrates a lack of understanding of agile development and deployment methodologies. A third incorrect approach is to focus solely on patching individual security vulnerabilities discovered after deployment, without addressing the systemic issue within the automation process itself. This reactive strategy is inefficient, costly, and does not prevent future compliance breaches. It ignores the principle of shifting left in security, where issues are identified and remediated as early as possible in the lifecycle. This approach is a direct violation of proactive risk management principles. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, iterative approach. First, clearly define the scope of the governance review and the specific compliance requirements. Then, analyze the existing automation workflows to identify specific points of failure or noncompliance. Prioritize remediation efforts based on the severity of the risk. Implement changes to the automation scripts, configurations, or underlying infrastructure to embed security and compliance controls. Crucially, establish continuous monitoring and auditing mechanisms to ensure ongoing adherence. Regular training and knowledge sharing within the team are also vital to foster a culture of security-aware automation. Question 13. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new cloud automation platform for network provisioning could significantly reduce manual configuration time and associated labor costs. However, a deeper dive into the potential consequences reveals several critical considerations beyond the initial financial projections. Which of the following represents the most prudent and professionally responsible approach to proceeding with this automation initiative? Option A. Focus solely on the technical capabilities of the automation platform to streamline provisioning, assuming that all regulatory and security requirements will be inherently met by the vendor's solution without further organizational due diligence. Option B. Prioritize the speed of deployment to gain a competitive advantage, deferring any in-depth security reviews or compliance checks until after the platform is fully operational and initial benefits are realized. Option C. Proceed with the implementation immediately, as the cost savings are substantial and the platform is widely adopted in the industry, assuming any operational or security adjustments can be addressed reactively. Option D. Conduct a detailed impact assessment that evaluates the automation's effects on existing operational workflows, data security protocols, access controls, and adherence to relevant U.S. data privacy regulations, e.g., HIPAA, PCI DSS, and develop a phased rollout plan based on these findings. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the implementation immediately, as the cost savings are substantial and the platform is widely adopted in the industry, assuming any operational or security adjustments can be addressed reactively. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise cloud automation, balancing the perceived immediate benefits of a new technology with a thorough understanding of its long-term implications and potential risks. The professional challenge lies in moving beyond superficial cost savings to a comprehensive impact assessment that considers operational, security, and compliance factors. A hasty decision based solely on initial cost-benefit projections can lead to significant unforeseen expenses, security vulnerabilities, and regulatory noncompliance down the line. The correct approach, which involves a detailed impact assessment encompassing operational efficiency, security posture, and regulatory adherence, represents best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of responsible technology adoption and risk management. Cisco's own guidelines and industry best practices emphasize a holistic view of automation initiatives. By evaluating how the proposed automation solution affects existing workflows, data security, access controls, and compliance with relevant data privacy laws, assuming a U.S. jurisdiction for this exam context, such as HIPAA for healthcare data or PCI DSS for payment card data. The organization can make an informed decision that minimizes future disruptions and ensures ongoing compliance. This proactive assessment prevents costly remediation efforts and potential legal repercussions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the initial cost savings without considering the operational impact fails to acknowledge the potential for increased complexity, the need for new skill sets, and the risk of service disruptions if the automation is not properly integrated or managed. This overlooks the operational expenditure, OpEx, implications that can outweigh initial capital expenditure, CapEx savings. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over a thorough security review is professionally unacceptable. In a U.S. regulatory context, neglecting security assessments for cloud automation can lead to violations of data protection laws, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. If U.S. entities handle EU citizen data or specific U.S. state data breach notification laws, this can result in severe fines, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. A third incorrect approach that dismisses the need for a comprehensive regulatory compliance review, assuming that automation inherently solves compliance issues, is also flawed. Automation tools must be configured and managed in a way that enables compliance. Without understanding how the automation interacts with existing compliance frameworks and potential new regulatory requirements, the organization risks introducing new compliance gaps or exacerbating existing ones. This could lead to audits, penalties, and a loss of business opportunities. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a phased approach. 1. Define clear objectives and scope for the automation initiative. 2. Conduct a thorough technical assessment of the proposed solution's capabilities and limitations. 3. Perform a comprehensive impact assessment covering operational, security, and compliance domains. This should involve cross-functional teams including IT operations, security, legal, and compliance. 4. Develop a detailed implementation and integration plan that addresses identified risks and mitigation strategies. 5. Establish ongoing monitoring and governance mechanisms to ensure the automation continues to meet objectives and remain compliant. 6. Regularly review and update the impact assessment as the technology landscape and regulatory environment evolve. Question 14. During the evaluation of a new Cisco enterprise cloud automation solution designed to streamline virtual machine provisioning, a critical implementation challenge arises concerning the integration of security policies and compliance checks. The project team is under pressure to deliver rapid deployment, but concerns have been raised about ensuring that the automated provisioning process adheres to the organization's established security baselines and relevant regulatory mandates. Which approach best balances the need for automation efficiency with the imperative of security and compliance? Option A. Deploy the automation solution using all vendor-provided default security configurations, assuming they meet all necessary enterprise security and compliance standards without further customization. Option B. Implement the automation solution with a focus on rapid deployment, deferring detailed security policy integration and compliance validation to a post-implementation review phase. Option C. Integrate security and compliance checks as a core component of the automation workflow, utilizing a phased rollout that includes rigorous testing and validation against defined security baselines and regulatory requirements before full operational deployment. Option D. Prioritize the speed of automation deployment, documenting the process only at a high level and addressing detailed security and compliance considerations only when specific incidents or audit findings necessitate it. The correct answer is B. Implement the automation solution with a focus on rapid deployment, deferring detailed security policy integration and compliance validation to a post-implementation review phase. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of automated cloud solutions and the need for robust security and compliance. The Cisco Enterprise Cloud Automation Framework, while designed for efficiency, must operate within a defined regulatory landscape. The core difficulty lies in balancing the speed of automation with the imperative to maintain data integrity, confidentiality, and availability, all while adhering to specific compliance mandates relevant to the enterprise's operational domain. The correct approach emphasizes a phased, risk-based integration of automation, incorporating security and compliance checks at critical junctures. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that automated processes are not only efficient, but also secure and compliant by design. It demonstrates a commitment to a secure development lifecycle and proactive risk management, which are foundational to maintaining trust and avoiding regulatory penalties. This approach prioritizes thorough validation and testing before full-scale deployment, minimizing the potential for introducing vulnerabilities or compliance gaps through automation. An incorrect approach that bypasses or inadequately addresses security and compliance validation during the automation implementation phase represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Specifically, it could lead to violations of data protection regulations, e.g., if sensitive data is mishandled or exposed, industry-specific compliance standards, e.g., PCI DSS for payment card data, HIPAA for healthcare data, or general cybersecurity best practices. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the organization's responsibility to protect its data and its customers' information, potentially leading to reputational damage and loss of business. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on vendor defaults without customization for the specific enterprise environment ignores the unique risk profile and regulatory obligations of the organization. This can result in security misconfigurations and compliance drift, as vendor defaults may not meet the stringent requirements of the enterprise's operating jurisdiction or industry. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thorough documentation and auditability creates significant challenges for future troubleshooting, incident response, and regulatory audits. Without clear records of automated processes, their configurations, and their outputs, it becomes difficult to demonstrate compliance or to identify and rectify issues, leading to potential non-compliance findings. The professional reasoning process for navigating such situations involves a structured risk assessment, a clear understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, and a phased implementation strategy. Professionals should prioritize solutions that integrate security and compliance into the automation pipeline from the outset, rather than treating them as an afterthought. This involves continuous monitoring, regular audits, and a commitment to staying abreast of evolving regulatory requirements and security threats. Question 15. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of resource provisioning that deviates from the established security baseline configurations, specifically regarding network segmentation and access control lists within the automated deployment pipeline. Which of the following approaches best addresses this deviation while adhering to best practices for automated cloud infrastructure management? Option A. Manually review and correct each instance of configuration drift after deployment, relying on existing incident response procedures to manage any security implications. Option B. Temporarily disable automated security checks within the pipeline to expedite the deployment of critical services, planning to address the configuration drift in a subsequent manual audit. Option C. Implement automated remediation workflows that trigger upon detection of configuration drift, reverting non-compliant resources to the baseline and logging the event for review. Option D. Update the monitoring system to ignore the specific deviations detected, as they are deemed minor by the operations team and do not appear to impact immediate service functionality. The correct answer is C. Implement automated remediation workflows that trigger upon detection of configuration drift, reverting non-compliant resources to the baseline and logging the event for review. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and operational efficiency with robust security and compliance requirements. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that automated processes, while designed for speed, do not inadvertently create vulnerabilities or violate established regulatory frameworks. The pressure to deliver services quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts that compromise security posture, making a thorough evaluation of best practices critical. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive and integrated security model within the automation lifecycle. By embedding security checks and compliance validations directly into the CI/CD pipeline, potential issues are identified and remediated early, minimizing risk and ensuring adherence to the specified regulatory framework. This aligns with the principle of security by design and demonstrates a commitment to responsible automation, which is paramount in regulated environments. An incorrect approach that bypasses security validation for speed fails to uphold the regulatory framework. This creates a direct compliance risk, as automated deployments may not meet the required security standards, potentially leading to data breaches or unauthorized access. Ethically, it represents a failure to protect sensitive data and systems. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on post-deployment manual audits is inefficient and reactive. It allows vulnerabilities to exist in production for a period, increasing the attack surface and the likelihood of a security incident. This reactive stance is often insufficient to meet the continuous compliance demands of modern regulatory environments. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the applicable regulatory requirements. This understanding should then inform the design of automation workflows, ensuring that security and compliance are not afterthoughts but integral components. Regular review and auditing of automated processes, coupled with continuous training on evolving security best practices and regulatory updates, are essential for maintaining a secure and compliant automated cloud environment. Question 16. Stakeholder feedback indicates a strong desire to accelerate the deployment of new cloud services, leading to pressure to streamline the automation pipeline. Considering the U.S. federal regulatory framework governing cloud environments, which approach best balances rapid deployment with robust compliance and security assurance. Option A. Focus automation efforts solely on functional deployment, deferring all security and compliance considerations to a separate, manual review process conducted by a dedicated compliance team. Option B. Prioritize deployment speed by implementing a deploy first, audit later strategy, relying on periodic manual audits to identify and remediate any compliance gaps after resources are live. Option C. Integrate automated compliance checks and security validations directly into the CI/CD pipeline, ensuring that resources are only provisioned if they meet predefined security and compliance benchmarks. Option D. Implement basic security configurations during automation, but allow for manual overrides by deployment teams to expedite the process, with compliance validation occurring only during major system updates. The correct answer is C. Integrate automated compliance checks and security validation directly into the CI/CD pipeline, ensuring that resources are only provisioned if they meet predefined security and compliance benchmarks. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, balancing the drive for rapid deployment with the imperative of robust security and compliance. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the specific regulatory framework relevant to the exam's jurisdiction, which for 300-470 automating the Cisco Enterprise Cloud is assumed to be U.S. federal regulations pertaining to cloud environments, such as NIST guidelines and potentially specific agency requirements if applicable. Stakeholders often prioritize speed, but a failure to adhere to compliance mandates can lead to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to ensure that automation solutions not only meet functional requirements, but also embed security and compliance controls from the outset, aligning with the principle of security by design. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it proactively integrates compliance checks and security validations into the automation workflows. This aligns with the U.S. regulatory emphasis on risk management and continuous monitoring in cloud environments. By embedding these checks, the automation process itself becomes a mechanism for enforcing compliance, reducing the likelihood of deploying non-compliant resources. This proactive stance is ethically sound as it prioritizes the protection of sensitive data and the integrity of the enterprise's cloud posture, thereby fulfilling the organization's duty of care and adherence to legal obligations. An incorrect approach that bypasses or inadequately addresses compliance validation during the automation pipeline is professionally unacceptable. Such an approach would represent a direct failure to adhere to U.S. federal regulations that mandate security controls and compliance verification for cloud deployments. This could include violations of NIST SB 800-53 controls or other relevant standards, leading to potential fines, audit failures, and loss of trust from regulatory bodies and customers. Ethically, It demonstrates a disregard for the security and privacy of data processed within the cloud environment, exposing the organization to undue risk. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on post-deployment manual audits for compliance is also professionally deficient. While manual audits have a role, relying on them as the primary or sole method for compliance in an automated environment is inefficient and prone to human error. It fails to leverage the capabilities of automation to enforce compliance at the point of deployment, increasing the risk of non-compliant resources entering the production environment before they can be detected. This can be seen as a failure to implement effective internal controls as often required by regulatory frameworks. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the applicable U.S. regulatory framework, including NIST guidelines and any industry-specific mandates. Before designing or implementing automation, professionals must identify all relevant compliance requirements and security controls. These requirements should then be translated into specific, testable conditions within the automation workflows. A risk-based approach should be employed, prioritizing the most critical compliance and security aspects. Continuous feedback loops with security and compliance teams are essential to ensure that automation solutions remain aligned with evolving regulatory landscapes and organizational policies. Question 17. Regulatory review indicates that automated cloud deployments must adhere to stringent data privacy regulations and security standards. A new initiative aims to accelerate the deployment of customer-facing applications, creating pressure to bypass certain security validation steps in the automation pipeline to meet aggressive timelines. Which approach best balances the need for rapid deployment with regulatory compliance and security? Option A. Prioritize deployment speed by allowing the automation to proceed without strict adherence to security baselines, with the understanding that remediation will occur later. Option B. Conduct comprehensive security audits only after all applications have been deployed to identify and remediate any compliance gaps. Option C. Implement automated security and compliance checks as mandatory gates within the CI/CD pipeline, ensuring that no resource is deployed without meeting predefined policy requirements. Option D. Assign security and compliance validation solely to a dedicated team that reviews deployments on a case-by-case basis after the automation process has completed. The correct answer is C. Implement automated security and compliance checks as mandatory gates within the CI/CD pipeline, ensuring that no resource is deployed without meeting predefined policy requirements. Explanation: Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and agility with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The pressure to deliver new services quickly can lead to shortcuts that inadvertently expose the organization to regulatory noncompliance and security vulnerabilities. The professional challenge lies in identifying and mitigating these risks proactively, ensuring that automation efforts do not create new attack surfaces or violate data handling policies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, risk-based strategy that integrates security and compliance requirements directly into the automation pipeline. This means defining clear security policies, implementing automated checks and balances, and ensuring that all deployed resources adhere to these standards from the outset. This aligns with the principles of security by design and compliance by design, which are fundamental to responsible cloud automation. By embedding these controls, the organization can achieve agility without compromising its regulatory obligations or security posture. This proactive integration is the most effective way to prevent breaches and maintain trust with customers and regulators. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on post-deployment security audits. This is reactive and insufficient because it allows vulnerabilities to exist in the production environment for a period, increasing the risk of exploitation. Regulatory frameworks often mandate proactive risk management, not just retrospective checks. Another incorrect approach is to delegate security and compliance responsibilities entirely to a separate team without integrating them into the automation workflow. This creates silos and delays, as security and compliance become bottlenecks rather than enablers. It also fails to instill a shared responsibility for security and compliance across the engineering teams, which is a key tenet of modern security practices and often a regulatory expectation. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of deployment over adherence to predefined security baselines. This directly contravenes regulatory requirements that mandate secure configurations and data protection. Such an approach creates a significant compliance gap and exposes the organization to severe penalties and reputational damage. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a continuous integration/continuous delivery (CI/CD) model that incorporates security and compliance gates at every stage. This involves defining security policies as code, automating policy enforcement, and conducting regular security and compliance assessments of the automation scripts and deployed infrastructure. A risk-based approach, prioritizing controls based on the potential impact of non-compliance or a security incident, is crucial. Regular training and awareness programs for the automation teams on relevant regulations and security best practices are also essential. Question 18. The efficiency study reveals that the current manual processes for provisioning and managing cloud infrastructure are a significant bottleneck, leading to delays in application deployment and increased operational costs. The organization is considering adopting a more automated approach using infrastructure as code (ISC) and configuration management tools. Which of the following strategies best balances the benefits of automation with the need for security and operational stability in a regulated enterprise cloud environment? Option A. Focus solely on automating configuration management for existing infrastructure, deferring ISC for new deployments until the team gains more experience with automation tools. Option B. Implement a comprehensive ISC strategy across all environments, prioritizing rapid deployment and relying on post-deployment security scans to identify and remediate issues. Option C. Automate all existing manual provisioning scripts without significant changes, assuming that the current manual processes are inherently secure and efficient. Option D. Adopt a phased approach to ISC implementation, starting with development and testing environments, integrating security and compliance checks into the automation pipelines, and conducting thorough validation before moving to production. The correct answer is B. Implement a comprehensive ISC strategy across all environments, prioritizing rapid deployment and relying on post-deployment security scans to identify and remediate issues. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals that the current manual processes for provisioning and managing cloud infrastructure are a significant bottleneck, leading to delays in application deployment and increased operational costs. The organization is considering adopting a more automated approach using infrastructure as code (ISC) and configuration management tools. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate benefits of automation with the long-term implications for security, compliance, and operational stability. A hasty or poorly planned automation strategy can introduce new vulnerabilities or lead to configuration drift, which can be difficult to detect and remediate. Correct approach involves a phased implementation of ISC, starting with non-critical environments and gradually expanding to production. This approach prioritizes security by integrating security checks and compliance policies directly into the automation pipelines. It also allows for thorough testing and validation at each stage, minimizing the risk of introducing errors. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that automation enhances, rather than compromises, the security posture and operational integrity of the cloud environment. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data privacy and financial reporting, often mandate auditable and consistent infrastructure configurations, which ISC facilitates. An incorrect approach would be to immediately automate all provisioning without adequate testing or security reviews. This could lead to the rapid deployment of insecure configurations, violating security best practices and potentially breaching compliance requirements. Another incorrect approach is to implement automation without establishing clear version control and rollback procedures. This would make it difficult to revert to a known good state in case of failures, increasing the risk of extended downtime and operational disruption, which could have significant financial and reputational consequences. A further incorrect approach is to automate without proper training for the operations team, leading to a lack of understanding and inability to manage the automated systems effectively, potentially resulting in misconfigurations and security gaps. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that begins with a thorough risk assessment of the proposed automation. This includes identifying potential security vulnerabilities, compliance gaps, and operational risks. The next step is to define clear objectives and success metrics for the automation initiative. A phased rollout strategy, coupled with robust testing and validation procedures, should be employed. Continuous monitoring and auditing of the automated infrastructure are crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and security. Finally, investing in team training and establishing clear governance policies for automation are essential for long-term success. Question 19. Operational review demonstrates that the automated provisioning of new cloud resources is consistently faster than manual processes, but there are concerns about potential security misconfigurations and deviations from established compliance policies due to the speed of deployment. What is the most effective strategy to address these concerns while maintaining the benefits of automation? Option A. Focus solely on optimizing the speed of automation, assuming that the IT security team will be able to identify and fix any compliance issues post-deployment. Option B. Implement automation scripts that bypass certain security checks to expedite the deployment process, with the understanding that these will be addressed in subsequent manual reviews. Option C. Integrate automated security and compliance checks directly into the CI/CD pipeline, ensuring that resources are validated against predefined policies before deployment, and that any violations trigger automated remediation or rollback. Option D. Conduct comprehensive manual security audits and compliance reviews after each automated deployment to identify and rectify any issues. The correct answer is C. Integrate automated security and compliance checks directly into the CI/CD pipeline, ensuring that resources are validated against predefined policies before deployment, and that any violations trigger automated remediation or rollback. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and agility with the imperative of maintaining robust security and compliance. The pressure to deliver new services quickly can lead to shortcuts or a lack of thorough validation, potentially introducing vulnerabilities or misconfigurations that violate regulatory requirements. The challenge lies in implementing automation that is both efficient and secure, ensuring that all deployments adhere to established policies and legal mandates without becoming a bottleneck. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves integrating security and compliance checks directly into the automation pipeline. This means leveraging tools and practices that enable continuous security validation and policy enforcement throughout the development and deployment lifecycle. For example, using infrastructure as code (ISC) with integrated policy as code tools, like Open Policy Agent, allows for automated checks against predefined security and compliance rules before infrastructure is provisioned. This proactive, shift-left security model ensures that automation itself is designed to be compliant, reducing the risk of human error and manual oversight. This aligns with the principle of security by design and demonstrates due diligence in adhering to regulatory frameworks by embedding compliance into the automated processes, thereby minimizing the attack surface and the likelihood of non-compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on post-deployment manual audits for security and compliance. This is reactive rather than proactive. It fails to prevent non-compliant configurations from being deployed in the first place, increasing the risk of breaches and regulatory penalties. From a regulatory perspective, this approach often falls short of demonstrating continuous monitoring and adherence, which are frequently mandated. Another incorrect approach is to implement automation without a clear understanding of the underlying security and compliance requirements, leading to the automation of insecure practices. This can result in widespread, systemic noncompliance, making remediation efforts significantly more complex and costly. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of responsibility in ensuring that automated systems do not inadvertently create or perpetuate risks. A third incorrect approach is to disable or bypass security checks within the automation framework to speed up deployments. This is a direct violation of security best practices and likely contravenes specific regulatory mandates that require certain security controls to be in place at all times. It prioritizes speed over safety and compliance, which is professionally unacceptable and carries significant legal and reputational risks. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing the integration of security and compliance into the automation design from the outset. This involves understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the enterprise cloud environment and translating those requirements into automated checks and policies. A continuous feedback loop, where automation reports on its own compliance status and alerts on deviations, is crucial. This iterative process ensures that automation evolves with changing regulations and threat landscapes, fostering a culture of secure and compliant cloud operations. Question 20. Implementation of a new cloud automation platform for managing sensitive customer data requires a thorough risk assessment. Which of the following actions best adheres to regulatory frameworks and professional best practices for this scenario? Option A. Focus the risk assessment solely on the technical performance and scalability of the automation platform, deferring security and compliance considerations to a later stage. Option B. Proceed with the platform deployment and initiate a risk assessment only after the system has been operational for a defined period. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential threats, vulnerabilities, and compliance gaps before the platform is deployed into production. Option D. Delegate the risk assessment to the development team, assuming they have sufficient expertise to identify all relevant security and compliance concerns. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential threats, vulnerabilities, and compliance gaps before the platform is deployed into production. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the imperative for robust security and compliance with the practicalities of rapid cloud automation deployment. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that risk assessment, a foundational element of secure and compliant operations, is not bypassed or inadequately performed in the pursuit of speed. Regulatory frameworks, particularly those governing data protection and critical infrastructure, mandate a proactive approach to identifying and mitigating risks before systems are operational. Failure to do so can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. The correct approach emphasizes integrating risk assessment into the automation pipeline from its inception. This aligns with best professional practices and regulatory expectations by ensuring that potential vulnerabilities and compliance gaps are identified and addressed early in the development lifecycle. By embedding risk assessment, organizations demonstrate due diligence and a commitment to security by design, which is a cornerstone of many compliance standards. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of deploying automated solutions that inadvertently expose sensitive data or violate regulatory mandates. An incorrect approach that skips or defers a comprehensive risk assessment before deployment is professionally unacceptable due to several regulatory and ethical failures. Firstly, it violates the principle of security by design and privacy by design, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by regulations such as GDPR or similar data protection laws. This failure to proactively identify and mitigate risks can lead to breaches of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, directly contravening the objectives of these regulations. Secondly, it demonstrates a disregard for due diligence, potentially exposing the organization to significant legal liabilities and fines. Ethically, it represents a failure to protect customer data and maintain the trust placed in the organization. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on technical functionality without considering the broader risk landscape, ignores the interconnectedness of technology with business operations and regulatory obligations. This narrow focus can lead to the deployment of solutions that are technically sound, but pose unacceptable security or compliance risks, thus failing to meet the professional standard of comprehensive risk management. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This framework should mandate that a thorough risk assessment is a prerequisite for the deployment of any new automated system or significant change. Key steps include identifying assets, threats, vulnerabilities, and potential impacts, analyzing the likelihood and severity of risks, and developing appropriate mitigation strategies. Professionals must advocate for the inclusion of risk assessment activities within project timelines and budgets, ensuring that adequate resources are allocated. When faced with pressure to expedite deployment, the professional's responsibility is to clearly articulate the risks associated with bypassing these essential steps and to propose alternative strategies that balance speed with security and compliance, such as phased rollouts with interim risk mitigation measures.